a man who's quickly become sort of the heart and soul of the new Puerto Rico, my friend Brock Pierce. And let's see you. Let's have another one of our famous chats. I think this is our third or fourth one that we've done.
Yeah, this kind of seems like
our milieu.
Our every 6 months sort of.
That's right.
Testing.
Yeah. And so I think the last time we spoke was in Singapore, and you know, it was interesting because we were sort of just seeing the change in the market of people being, you know, leery of government enforcement and how you play it, and the ICOs had sort of, other than maybe EOS and Telegram, had really started to move down. Now it's been just like a crunch to, like, you even talk about people doing an ICO and they just laugh at you. It's sort of become like the .com joke in the 2000s, but then Amazon came and the internet turned out not to be a bad idea. Where are you seeing the market right now?
It's not quite the year 2000. We both lived through the .com rise and fall. And when the bubble burst in the .com boom, there was zero financing available. I don't care how good your project was. I was a managing director for a sector-focused Clearstone fund. Clearstone was called Idea Lab Capital. They were the most successful sort of internet venture capitalist in Wave 1.0. And they were the lead investor in PayPal. They put the first $5 million in on a $10 million pre. And so I kind of know the whole PayPal story. And so when the bubble burst, PayPal was rising. It was the hottest startup any VC had ever seen. You know, you'd look at these metrics and you'd say, wow, what a business. PayPal couldn't raise money from anyone. There was no VC on the planet that would fund it. There were no investors on the planet that would fund it. Clearstone, who was the lead investor, wanted to fund it themselves, but in their general partnership docs or in their limited partnership docs, it said that they can't be 100%, they can't be more than 50% of the capital in any follow-on financing that they had led previously. So they're dying to put the money in the company, and they can't find a single investor to co-invest with them. They're running around begging. Eventually, they had to buy Elon Musk's company, X.com, that had no employees left. It was completely wound down. Sequoia had funded it, but had 10 million of cash in the bank. And so Elon's company was bought just to get the 10 million of cash. It was the only way to finance PayPal. It was nuclear winter. If you were an investor and you went to your investment committee and you proposed investing in an internet company, you'd be fired on the spot. It was that bad. Like, people don't remember, but it was like nuclear winter for a couple of years. Right now, obviously, the market is, for ICOs, largely dried up. But there are still some projects getting financings done. Generally, they're based in Asia. You know, if you're, you know, the U.S. I think is accounting for about 4% of, you know, ICO financings anyway. So if you are, you know, trying to do an ICO, this is not where you're going to get it done. You're going to get it done largely in Asia. It's where the bulk of the money is. You need to have, you know, basically roadshows and access to Chinese investors, Korean investors, and Japanese investors. I would say one thing: when the bubble burst for the internet, even though all of the smart money dried up, there was another 3 to 6 months where a few financings were getting done by Europeans. You know, basically the people that didn't have their fingers on the pulse and realized that, you know, the market is completely, the floor is completely fallen out, and they just weren't aware. So that, we could be going through that right now, but I think the market's going to come back quickly. I don't think it's going to come back as ICOs. I think it's going to come back as STOs. As investors are demanding more rights. I love utility tokens. I love the utility token architecture. The problem is it doesn't provide rights for token holders that are adequate in a market where everybody's rushing in and you have a lot of bad actors. Utility tokens require, you know, really good community leadership, you know, people that serve their community first, themselves second. That's the only way they work, because you're really trusting a small group of people to do the right thing every step of the way. And once you've had a boom with this much capital flowing into the market, it's obviously attracted a lot of people, and not all of them always behaving, you know, in the best way possible. And so as participants in the ecosystem, we need to demand more from the entrepreneurs that are creating these things. And I think in most instances that will be more rights in the form of a security token.
Well, with the utility tokens, I mean, falling off a cliff in today's definition, I think September was maybe 60 million or something like that raised, 100 million. That's still way more than we had in like 2013, 14, 15, and the first half of 2016 combined. I mean, you like to show that one like bubble thing with everything, the history of the token. I mean, so utility tokens are not dead. I think they're going to, morph into a couple different areas. I mean, there's always going to be room, I think, for the foundation approach that has the next Ethereum, the next EOS, the next Stellar, the next Aeon, and it's people will vote where their feet and their wallets are, and if they think something's a better mousetrap, someone in the community is going to fund it. And I think that those are usually pretty safe being foundations. They're not going to be ruled as securities. I think that what the market's waiting for right now, because there's this giant sucking sound coming out of Silicon Valley. So many people in the last year have come and said, hey, I got a great idea for tokenization, and like literally a year ago, it would have flown off the shelves. And now they're like, but I just talked to Wilson Sonsini, and they told me that I'm going to go to jail if I do it. And so I guess I have to go to Malta, and my VCs don't want me to go to Malta. And all of a sudden, they're like, oh, we just took another venture round. And just killed off the idea, so we're going to kick it down the curb another year or two. So I've been talking to lawyers, constantly. It seems like my second job is talking to lawyers. But there seems to be at least a good sense that sometime in the next year, there will be a no-action letter that defines, like Wyoming has tried to, about what is a security in the token world and what is a utility or consumption token. When we have that no-action letter, we'll talk about security tokens because that is the future, but will that sort of still reignite the utility token market where there are good teams and good ideas just under another model where maybe it's a hybrid or it's like people demand a little bit of equity and the token? Or where do you see if tomorrow the SEC came out with a no action letter and said essentially the Wyoming Act, that's now federal, what would it do?
I think it would be a wonderful thing if that were to happen. I mean, clearly, one of the biggest problems you have if you're in this sector and you're in the United States is the regulatory uncertainty. I'd rather a bad ruling and certainty than uncertainty. Uncertainty is the thing that makes most people uncomfortable, where you don't know where the lines are drawn. It's unclear whether you're, at risk. Investors hate it even more. They don't like uncertainty, and that's why so much of this market is leaving the United States. You're seeing so many talented entrepreneurs, so many talented people are moving. They're getting up and leaving because of it. They're moving to Asia, they're going to Europe, they're going wherever they need to be if they wish to participate in this market where they can at least sleep at night knowing what the rules are. So I think that would be a great outcome, but I don't think it's going to solve what is one of the main problems, which is it would over time. I imagine participants in this ecosystem would start to be more rational in their approaches. They wouldn't be giving, kids with a white paper $100 million. Venture capital is known as milestone-based, financing. And so, normally you get a certain amount of capital to accomplish a certain objective, and if you do that, then the market will give you more capital. But it's got these checks and balances to basically, you have to hit your milestones, you have to hit your marks. The problem is if you build in milestones into your smart contract and there's provisions by which you get it back, it triggers securities laws again. So, I mean, all of these little bells and whistles that are kind of important, I think, keep pointing back to security tokens. Not necessarily where what you're buying and selling is equity, but it gives you, from an instrument perspective, the ability to pay dividends, the ability to have royalties, the ability to have ownership, the ability to have provisions like milestones that would trigger redemptions or the right to get capital back. And I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all. I think that each project needs to be judged on their own merits. But I do think that, yeah, there's clearly the utility token market is going to persist and continue to exist unless there's some really harsh decision made for what I'd call protocols. Protocols are, when you're talking about the Aeons, the EOSes, the Ethereums, whatever, the Tezoses, those I think will continue to stay utilities. But it's when you start moving up the stack into, call it dApps, and applications and things that are built, I think you're going to need to have you're going to need more tools in the toolkit to deliver the market what it's going to ultimately require. And I think that those will come in the way of security tokens. And that's just the industry growth. The bigger opportunity is in security tokens outside of what we focus on, every day. If you're call it deep into crypto and blockchain, it's ultimately in the securitization of all the world's assets. As you start to securitize real estate and then allow for fractionalized ownership of it, as you start to securitize all the world's debt markets, as you begin to securitize all the world's equity markets to compete with the existing exchanges, I mean, that growth, which I think we're going to see next year, is going to dwarf everything we've done to date. And that's just in taking traditional assets and using the technologies that we've developed to make them more efficient.
So, in addition to all your other accomplishments, sort of father of virtual currency pre-Bitcoin with what you did in the gaming space, we were all sort of involved in the first ICO Mastercoin, and then we talked with Jeremy earlier about Augur and the first kind of utility token. But you and Jeremy was on the team as well. But you really created the security token with BCAP, and so other people kind of talked about it for a while. You went out and did it. And so, what was that experience like? That was only 20 months ago or so.
Yeah. So I had been talking to entrepreneurs for a while about doing a security token. Well, I went and advised a company called Distilled Jeans. I think they were the second or third company to do a Reg A, basically Jobs Act financing. So I went, while I was building stuff in this space, I went and spent time with all the crowdfunding people I could. I started advising deals because I wanted to understand how Regulation S, Regulation D, Regulation A, and Regulation A Plus worked. I saw that these would eventually converge. And then I started telling the operators of these crowdfunding, for equity platforms, that they need to get familiar with blockchain. If they don't start upgrading their businesses to blockchain, they're going to be left in the dust. I go, these two things go hand in hand, and they're going to get married at some point. You're already the market leader. You guys should do this. Most of them, didn't quite understand it. And then I was pitching entrepreneurs the same thing for about a year, and I couldn't get anyone to do a security token. And so, I prefer just to give people the ideas and let them run with it. I don't really need to own any of it, nor do I really want any credit. But in this particular case, I couldn't get anyone to do it, so I said, all right, well, I'll do it myself. I'll show people how it's done. I'll open source the model, and we giddy up and go. Now, the reason why you haven't seen that market become robust yet is I put the cart before the horse. I tokenized a fund. I tokenized equity. Using Reg S and Reg D, but that's now a security. And for securities to trade, it needs to trade on exchanges that are registered to be able to trade in securities. And so there's no exchanges for security tokens, at least not compliant exchanges. That now is all about to change because I went and told everybody security tokens are the future, security tokens are the future, and I went and helped 10 or 20 people basically start building a security exchange. The only person that was already going down that path aggressively on their own was Patrick Byrne at T0. Because T0, well, Patrick was the one that tokenized the first bond. I tokenized the first equity, and so, I was just with him 2 nights ago too. Wonderful, wonderful guy. Love Patrick Byrne. And I guess I advised T0. But you now have 10, maybe even 20 security token exchanges that'll be live by this time next year. You'll probably have 3 to 5 before the end of this year. I mean, we're talking literally in the next few months. You're going to begin seeing the security token market start to really come to life.
How will these work? Because obviously in the U.S., credit investors only, unless it's a Reg A+, and then you can't do it for a year. ATSs are very messy. Do you think it's mainly going to be Reg A pluses so that everybody has access to it, or do you think it'll mainly be sort of crowdfunding Reg D and people just simply, I mean, if it's a fund and it gives a dividend, you're really not in a rush to sell it, right? I mean, if you're buying Blockchain Capital's BCAP, it's nice if you can sell it, but that's not, you didn't buy it to flip it, you bought it because you're hoping you're going to make some great bets and get a return in 7 to 10 years.
And I think there's a pretty good portfolio there. It obviously did very well with Block 1 or EOS, but there's no bad deal in that portfolio. I mean, we're traditional fiduciaries, or at least I was in that instance when I was still at Blockchain Capital. But I think what you'll likely see is people are going to do Reg S and Reg D offerings, for their first financing, and then they'll switch to a Reg A or a Reg A plus after the fact to open up and broaden the market. So basically, a Reg S, Reg D is basically your private sale, your private financing, and then when you do your Reg A, you're essentially going IPO. You're essentially going public with it so that everybody can trade. And I think that that's the model you're going to see. No one's done that yet, but I'd wager that that's how it's going to play out.
And would that end up involving a token swap? In other words, you'd be listed on like an ATS type instrument first, and then when you said, hey, we're now going public, it'll be a Reg A, and you'll have that offering, but then people who already own the Reg S can convert it?
Yeah, along those lines. I mean, essentially, it's like going IPO. You have your private shares, companies going public, and now you get your public shares.
So I've been saying for a while, I mean, as big of a fan as I am of like tokenization models and the utility tokens and just sort of defending the right to exist, I also agree that in 5 years, the $10 trillion market's going to be tokenized equities, securitized real estate, et cetera. And one example that I've sort of given as being just a great model that's a win-win-win would be restaurants. Because restaurants right now, it's a pain in the butt. If you've got like a hot little chain, there's a place called Andre's Bistro that Dominic Morocco is going to be one of our judges on the third day. He's an owner of, and they're trying to expand from restaurant 1 to restaurant 2, right? They've got a good brand because Andre's on the Strip, is an iconic brand. And they have to go and do like every restaurant. I use Tender Greens as an example in LA, and go and have dinners with restaurant angels and $25,000 and $50,000 checks, and then you give up this slug of equity, and then you get introduced to the restaurant VCs, and then all of a sudden you give up that slug of equity, and then you end up then going into your mezzanine round. By the time you go and do a public offering as an S1 to be Chipotle, your whole management team is completely under the liquidation preference and maybe has 10% of the equity. On the other hand, if you started out with, like you said, a Reg S and then convert to a Reg A, they're going to have a lot more of it, and you could have a hybrid token where you can also show your stock ownership and get a discount at any restaurant you go to while they're expanding. What other industries do you see sort of ripe for this type of model?
Well, it's ultimately all of them, and I want to just add to that one point. I think you said the word 10 trillion. This is going to be a quadrillion dollar market. It's not often you get to use that word, but that's what the kind of numbers we're talking about here. When you talk about securitization of all the world's assets, it's going to be the biggest market there's ever been. And it's going to come in many forms. I really, really, really like real estate. It's where are the pain points? What was interesting about BCAP and why I said this will eventually be the death of venture capital, give it 10 years, is what are the main pain points? What are the flaws with venture capital? One is it's a lack of liquidity. You're typically, your funds are locked up for 7 to 12 years. And number 2 is it's not democratized. It's only available to the financial elite, right? And a subset of the financial elite. By tokenizing venture, you're democratizing it and making it available to most everyone. Okay, maybe you have to be accredited in this market or that, but we're talking relative to what it is to what it becomes, that's pretty much fully democratized. And if you're not an accredited investor anyway, you probably shouldn't be investing in venture funds.
But if you're an accredited investor, you still can't invest in Sequoia.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I don't care. You can't get into Sequoia. You can't get into these funds unless you're part of the club. And it's a very small elite club to be in any of those primary funds. You can't get in even if you're rich. Good luck. You can be, and I mean very wealthy. You can have $1 billion and you're not going to get into most of these funds. It's not about money. It's about access. And so democratization of it is a great thing. And so those are big deals. And by tokenizing it, you're making it liquid, which makes it interesting to a lot more people. Most people can't afford to have their money tied up for 5 to 10 years. They just can't make plans with that level of foresight. And so real estate, I think, is another interesting asset class. It's generally illiquid. I mean, there's a market for it if you're willing to fire sell it, but you can do that with a venture fund too. If you're willing to sell it for, a meaningful discount, there is, someone else that will likely take your position Real estate being even more liquid just because, there's enough people that know the market. You sell it cheap enough, someone will take it off your hands immediately for what number of pennies. So when you tokenize it, yeah, you're going to be able to change the way in which people get mortgages. I mean, I don't think you'll need a mortgage anymore at some point once the market is developed enough. What'll happen is you say, I want to bring in capital for.
So we're having
I think
problems.
we might have battery problems. Is what
Yeah.
Anyway, I can shout.
Okay.
Testing.
It's a small enough room.
Anyway,
Anam, can you go and see if we can get this fixed or get another one?
But when you go out and you say, okay, I want to buy a house, in the future I can envision an environment where you post, okay, I'm going to put down 10% of the money, I'm looking to raise 90%, I'm committing to a 10-year lease, and I'm going to pay my rents, and then those dividends basically get paid out to everyone. You're going to crowd fund. It'll become peer-to-peer financing. Over time, I would envision, banks and mortgages essentially disappearing over a long enough period of time. But I think, these are the types of things that you're going to see with just general disruption everywhere. So peer-to-peer sort of lending, the fractionalized ownership of it is what's going to make that really interesting. Because I can say I have $1,000 and I want to invest in, what's the zip code here?
This would be 89.
8902. Whatever the 5-digit number is for the strip. If you said I think this is going to be a good place to invest, you could theoretically buy $1,000 worth of the whole strip. You've got $20 in every building. As you start to fractionalize things, the market will change in a massive way. And the reason why this is going to happen reasonably quickly, in my opinion, is because investors provide a massive discount on assets when there's a lack of liquidity. There's a liquidity discount. This is why when you see tokens, utility tokens versus venture capital financings, if you see small companies that go public into the public markets versus venture capital, you're going to see a massive disparity. 5 to 10 times the difference in value because investors don't like a lack of liquidity. When real estate becomes a truly liquid asset, I would envision real estate prices going up by 100 or 200%. And when people start realizing that when they tokenize their homes or they tokenize their buildings, and as this market starts to mature, that the value in their real estate might double, and it's going to cost them $5,000 to tokenize it and do it for themselves. That's the economic incentive that'll cause this entire thing to go in a rapid domino fall. Because you're basically unlocking a massive amount of value in your real estate by taking it from illiquid to liquid, from single owner to fractionalized owner, and to make that available to the set, all the potential investors that are going to be interested in these things. And I don't mean people like us. The investors that are going to be doing this for the most part are going to be massive pools of institutional capital.
So what happens to Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and your local hometown bank that's making those loans and refinancings right now?
I think that they're going to continue to be in that business for some time, and then you're going to have people that just are slow to the game that'll keep applying for mortgages, but it's going to be a long, painful process for if what I've described, which is not happening yet. This is a purely theoretical view of the future, but if this does start to happen, and if any of what I just said ends up being true, it's going to be a big downturn for all the banks that rely on a mortgage market as their core business. And remember, they don't have to lose 100% of their business to experience real difficult times. If they lose 10% of their revenue, 10% of their business, they have to lay off people. They lose 20% of their business, they're probably going out of business. It's not like the whole thing has to go.
So I'm going to switch topics a little bit. One of your hats, no pun intended, is...
I wear many.
You wear many, is chairman of the Bitcoin Foundation. So Bitcoin is back into the narrative of Bitcoin is a scam, Bitcoin is dead. We've been through this so many times, it's ridiculous, but and it's all academics, Dr. Doom, Paul Krugman, who said that the internet would not be as big as the fax machine. et cetera, people who have, interests. Jamie Dimon has a big credit card processing company. Are people taking the Bitcoin is dead more seriously this time, or do you think the general population is just running away again, or are they sort of curious, listening with a grain of thought? I mean, how effective is the FUD, and at what point do you think there'll be a clearer picture of what the potential of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and tokenized assets is?
I feel very bullish as it relates to Bitcoin right now. I don't get any feeling that the market for Bitcoin is soft. I think we're pretty well stabilized. If anything, I think now is actually a reasonably good entry point. For most of the market, depending upon what it is, I mean, you need to, the most important thing is I never give anyone investment advice of any sort whatsoever. The only advice I give people and I encourage people is to invest in themselves, and that's specifically in knowledge. Learn what you need to learn so that you can make informed decisions for yourself. As long as you're making the decisions and you've taken the time to be adequately informed, no one is going to be able to take advantage of you. Don't take advice from anyone else. Learn from them, take what you want from them, but mostly just take the information and the knowledge that allows you to make your own informed decisions. That, or give your money to a professional asset manager to make those decisions for you. Those are your two choices. And these are people that have actual vehicles, that understand what it is to be a fiduciary, that have domain expertise, and this is what they specialize in. Those are really the only two ways to do it. Either pay a professional properly or do the work. But in terms of the FUD, I mean, of course we're going to get that. Every time the market goes up, we've been through this cycle many times, the market comes down, and the Krugmans of the world come out and go, I told you so. And but they also said it about Bitcoin when it was at 70. They said it when Bitcoin was at 700. They said it about Bitcoin when it was at 7,000. Their narrative hasn't changed, and they are literally the same people that have made these statements. This isn't the first time they've given their FUD. They're just screaming louder than ever because they probably feel pretty stupid for having been so wrong so far.
Dr. Doom said that Bitcoin was going to crash miserably when it was $58.
Yes, exactly. I mean, a broken clock is right twice a day. Even blind squirrels occasionally find a nut. I mean, most of these economists, I think, are snake oil salesmen.
Yeah. So, couple of
they get a degree to get paid well to be able to back up somebody else's, bullshit.
So I'm going to go into the lightning round. We have a little tradition of doing this at the end of these talks.
I hope we're going to touch Puerto Rico at least briefly.
Of course we are. It'll be the final 10 minutes or so. ETF.
The ETF, I think, will be good for the Bitcoin price. I think that it's going to happen at some point. It is inevitable. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. And if I had to guess, I think, this time it's probably real. We're probably going to see it happen sometime in the next 12 months. I mean, but that's because multiple groups have been working on this for 4 or 5 years. It's been a Herculean effort to get that done. Me personally, I'm not a big fan of it. Because I don't like the prices up. I prefer the prices down. I know that's counterintuitive, but I'm not in it for the money. As I often talk about, a billionaire is someone that's positively impacting the lives of 1 billion people. I'm trying to change the game. I don't play the game of what I describe as compounding interest, the pursuit of making money for generally self-interested reasons. I'm changing the game and I'm playing the game of compounding impact. So from my perspective, I'd rather see less, speculators that haven't taken the time to show up to, rooms like this, just able to very casually come into the market. It will drive up the price. Yes, we'll all make some money, but what that does is it just drives up the price versus organic, sort of growth from real fundamental adoption of not just speculators, but people that are rolling up their sleeves and building things. What it does is it raises the bar for builders to get in. And I care about the developers. I care about the builders. I don't care about the speculators. Though they serve a function and a role.
Backed. B-A-K-K-T, the ICE product.
Yeah, the Intercontinental or ICE Exchange. Yeah, they own the New York Stock Exchange, which is based out of Atlanta. I think they also own the Euronext. I've spent some time with their CEOs over the years, back in the beginning of this. But no, I think that's great. I think that, yeah, you've got Dr. Doom sitting here talking about how this entire thing is a scam, but you got the people that operate the most advanced exchanges in the world saying the opposite. In Times Square at NASDAQ, NASDAQ is advertising that blockchain is the future of NASDAQ. I mean, I'd be a little uncomfortable as an economist going out and making some of the statements right now when the people that actually, the capitalists, that actually have, to deliver and actually have to execute and are held accountable for the things that they do with their jobs and their ability to manage money. They don't live off speaking fees because they have some prize for some statement they made a long time ago. The real intelligent organizations are all making this bet. I think it's a great thing. Let's see better exchanges, more exchanges. I don't think it's going to matter in the long run anyway, because I think the exchange market is going to develop in two ways. You're going to have local exchanges that provide the local on-ramps and off-ramps for fiat, and then you're going to end up with decentralized exchanges. You're going to end up with DEXs, which, so they'll end up potentially really just being a Coinbase and Gemini competitor, and having more on-ramps and more off-ramps and having more reliable on-ramps is a good thing. And because even for the Coinbases and the Geminis, banking has always been a bit of a challenge. Organizations like this hopefully do not have that same experience, and that would be a good thing. We want more on-ramps, more off-ramps.
Wyoming.
I think it's awesome that you're seeing regulatory arbitrage. You're seeing states and governments competing for economic stimulus. They're looking for economic, sort of activity to come into their region. And this is what governments have been doing forever. This is not a new thing. And I'm really proud to see Wyoming taking a leadership position. If anyone comes to me and says, okay, I'm doing something in this space, where should I incorporate? And then if the answer is that they should be US domiciled, my answer is you only have one of two choices. That's Wyoming or Puerto Rico. If you're building a utility token, it's Wyoming. And Puerto Rico only if you actually plan on coming down there. But those are really the only two jurisdictions. I think what Wyoming has done, if Delaware doesn't get their act together, is they'll be the new Delaware. Now, I think Delaware is already also far along in the process of trying to follow in Wyoming's footsteps. But if you're incorporating in the U.S., Wyoming is the place to be.
And that's a natural segue to Puerto Rico. So it's hard to believe that you've only been a Puerto Rican resident now for 9 months and 23 days.
So December.
Yeah. So under a year. You've had quite an impact on the island. And so first question is it what you envisioned? And if not, what was above your expectations and what has not yet met your expectations?
Oh, there's so much.
It's a loaded question.
Where to focus? Well, it's exceeding my expectations in terms of the number of people that are coming down and the quality of the people that are coming down there, and specifically the quality of the people that are staying. So of the people that have moved to Puerto Rico over the last year that I've met, and it's big numbers. This is actually a very big movement. You're seeing a lot of people in the blockchain space, coming down to Puerto Rico in bigger numbers than I would have ever imagined. Puerto Rico is this year had more applications for 20 and 22 acts than ever before by far. And the data I have that isn't, a lot of them are from our space. But that's as you'd expect. Most people didn't know about these tax advantages. And for right or for wrong, we've gotten a lot of media attention. So with that, we've made a lot of people aware. And a lot of crypto people specifically have been made aware of the benefits of being in Puerto Rico. So naturally, as a result of that, and by the way, if the market hadn't been gone from bull to bear, we'd probably see 2 or 3x the numbers. The people that would, because most people's net worth have dropped substantially since January to today, not increased. Had numbers been increasing, I think we'd probably see double or triple the people going, my taxes. But I think that's great. But of the people that have been moving down, we've got about a 1/3 conversion rate. So for every person that moves to Puerto Rico, about 2/3 are leaving, 1/3 is staying, which I think is reasonably good at this time. And the people that are staying are the ones that want to make a difference. They're not really there just for the tax benefits. By the way, you don't need to move to Puerto Rico to save on taxes anymore. The Puerto Rican game is basically up in the sense that you can now live in any part of the United States and get the same tax benefit. You no longer need to move to Puerto Rico. There's new tax legislation taking effect in December called the Special Opportunity Zone tax incentives. You can take your capital gains, invest it into a Special Opportunity Zone fund that is investing in poor neighborhoods that need economic stimulus. And if those funds are locked up for 10 years that invest 90% into these regions, you pay no capital gains tax. So you take whatever you were going to give to the IRS and you basically, it gets invested into neighborhoods that are in need of help. So no one has to move to Puerto Rico anymore to get this benefit, because other than regular income. Now you're all capital gains exempt if you make investments into Special Opportunity Zone
and
funds.
there are maps you can find online of where that is. Puerto Rico, the entire island, pretty much is special.
Yeah, all of Puerto Rico is. And by the way, if you have capital gains and you're looking to do these sorts of things, you can talk to me. I specialize in Oz funds.
And again, in Vegas, I think about 2/3 of Vegas fits on that. And obviously, every major city, even the Bay Area, has got some opportunity zones that you can invest in.
Yeah, and this is from the IRS. The IRS wants you to do this. This is legislation that's taking effect in December. They're saying, hey, if we can get people to take their capital gains and invest it into poor neighborhoods that need help, awesome. This is, if you're aware of it, clearly you should do it. There's no I mean, if you don't, it's because you were not informed.
So tell me a little bit about sort of the history of Restart Week. The first one ended up being kind of concurrent with the second CoinAgenda Caribbean, and really kind of grew into something that you're really doing what I was hoping to do with Blockchain Island, and you've taken it way further.
We're doing it together. I mean,
we're doing it together.
It's
yes.
Me, it's us.
I understand.
I'm a wee guy, certainly with you.
And I've supported all those and contributed, and even the one I couldn't go to, I at least paid for the pizza and beer in my Juez. And you have one in Ponce next week. You got one in Fajardo coming up. Tell me about sort of how this has evolved in being able to sort of bring sort of this message of not just blockchain, but just opportunity for the island rebuilding overall. What's your and Crystal's vision on this?
Well, for me, I want to make a positive impact. I didn't move.
By the way, congratulations, and you're about to be a proud father of a new Puerto Rican baby, right?
Yeah. It's like there's a lot of hedge fund people that have moved to Puerto Rico, tons of them. If you are someone that can sit in your underwear and trade energy, trade stocks, whatever it is, you do affiliate marketing, there are so many wealthy Americans that have moved to Puerto Rico that fit into that category, but very few of them do anything to help Puerto Rico. These are all the people that have moved to Puerto Rico over the last 6-7 years to benefit from these tax advantages. And very few of them give back. I hope over time what Puerto Rico will see is that this wave of people that are moving down there, yes, are benefiting from the incentives that were there to attract them, but these are people that also give back. These are people that pay it forward. These are people that understand that giving is the greatest gift there is. These are people that are comfortable rolling up their sleeves and getting their hands dirty to make a difference. We put solar panels on roofs. We feed people. We are doing things all over the island. And so the idea of this event series is it's a decentralized event. Anyone can have an event at Restart. We don't police. I mean, we encourage, obviously, the right people to hopefully participate. And I guess if really bad actors were trying to do something very bad, we'd have to cross that bridge when we get there. Fortunately, it's not worth it to anyone. But we did the first events together. For CoinAgenda 2, you had Blockchain Unbound, you had D10E. I think there were like 30 or 40 events going on over the course of that week.
You could not get a hotel or an Airbnb on the island that week.
Yeah, for that first Restart Week where we pulled everybody down. You'd been leading the charge and hosting those first events, but then to have everybody just kind of creating this concentration of activity all at the same time, and parties and concerts and Akon and Wu-Tang and, Busta Rhymes. It was crazy. It was
We're going to look to do something like that again. We sort of set some preliminary dates, but turns out that's Asia Blockchain Week, so I'm going to see if we can move it a day.
Yeah,
or two.
late March or early April, I think, is where we target. I can't do mid-April because my baby's due somewhere between like March 9th to the 14th.
Thinking more early March, but we'll figure it out.
But yeah, so that first one was in San Juan. We sold out all the flights. We sold out the city, including the neighboring cities. After the hurricane, this is the first time, and I think the only time Puerto Rico has experienced something like this. And it's, when you start looking for metrics and what have we done that's actually having, some sort of impact, selling out the city is a good start. That tourism and people showing up is actually one of the most important things that help Caribbean islands. That's the lifeblood of these islands is tourism. It's those cruise ships that, they depend on. They depend on tourists coming down there and spending money, which we all do and did. So we did that, but the island isn't just San Juan. The island is much more than San Juan, but we needed to obviously begin in the capital because it's the most accessible. And then we said, let's go to the west coast of the island, and that's where we did Mayaguez and Rincon. In Mayaguez, you have the University of Puerto Rico Mayaguez. It's the number 15 engineering school in the country. It's also one of the main recruiting places for NASA, Google, and Facebook because they're producing some of the highest volumes of great engineering talent in the country, but there's no jobs for them in Puerto Rico. So it's one of the greatest places to recruit because they're all looking to move wherever they need to go to get a great job. And so, the goal is to start to teach the students that they can be entrepreneurs, that there can be high-tech jobs, high-quality companies there that they can start or join. And so that young people don't think that the only opportunity for them is to leave the island. They can start to dream of a future where they can build their own reality because we can bring the tools that don't exist. There's not a single venture fund in Puerto Rico. We're bringing venture funds, we're bringing angel investors, we're bringing mentors, we're bringing companies. These sorts of things will radically transform the landscape for those young people, where if they so choose, entrepreneurship and startups will be a path, that is there for them. And so we wanted to go to the West Coast. Now we're going to Ponce, which is the southern part of the island, the second largest city. And Ponce has got a massive port. So supply chains, trade finance, it's also where all the agriculture is best positioned. And so we're spending a lot of time talking about renewable energy. It's more where can you have social impact from that perspective. Highly recommend coming. You also have bioluminescent bays down there. So there's 11 bioluminescent bays in the world. 3 of them are in Puerto Rico. It's actually more than that. Almost half of all, because they're not all considered to be bioluminescent bays, almost half the world's magical waters are around Puerto Rico. Most people don't understand how magical and enchanting that island is. Another thing that's worth noting is Puerto Rico has more bachelor degrees per capita than any part of the United States. Puerto Ricans are the best educated of any part of the US. You also have more artists per capita than any other part of the United States. It's a land with extraordinary potential. They just haven't had the tools. They've suffered for 500 years, following the arrival of Christopher Columbus. And then the last event will be in December on the east. And so we'll have done the north, the west, the south, the east, and that's brought people, it's given everyone an opportunity as a group to see the island, explore the culture, learn the various, sort of see what's needed, see what's possible, see where you can best contribute. Because it's not all going to be in the capital. I'm almost certain that the entrepreneur sort of startup hub of Puerto Rico is not going to be in San Juan. It's never in the capital, where the incumbents are headquartered. Startups tend to always go to the other side of the country, or they go far from typically the capital because they want to do innovative things that are sometimes perceived as disruptive, and the capital is normally not the place that's done.
So you see Aguadilla more than Santurce in terms of the next mecca for, obviously the pharma industry moved to Isabella.
Yeah, so for tech, I think that Mayaguez is obviously very important because of the students, but Ponce I think is perhaps one of the most interesting. It's beautiful old buildings. It's as beautiful as old San Juan.
And the best weather too.
And the weather is like Southern California. It's dry desert. I think it's, it could end up, it's going to be in multiple places initially, and then it'll ultimately be determined by where do the most successful startups end up. You know, Seattle is Seattle because of Microsoft. You know, the reason why, you know, it's when Puerto Rico ends up with a couple of, you know, success stories, wherever those success stories come from is likely going to become the main hub. It'll be determined by the entrepreneurs down there. You know, I can help by, you know, being a VC and saying that, okay, my fund, 1/3 of all the capital, this is not yet committed, but for example, 1/3 of all the capital coming out of my fund that's dedicated to investing in Puerto Rican startups will only go to companies in Ponce and the surrounding areas. 1/3 will only go to Mayaguez and the surrounding areas, and 1/3 is for rest of island. By just doing a simple move like that, by putting, you know, that flagpole in the ground, you're telling entrepreneurs, here's where the capital is. Cost of living is, you know, real estate is 1/10 of the price of San Juan. So for entrepreneurs that are on shoestring budgets, which if you're an entrepreneur, that's kind of how it goes, unless you've been in, you know, the ICO market the last year or two, that's not normal. Normally, you know, expect to, you know, have to live a very, very, very frugal life.
And there's some beautiful, beautiful like areas just above Ponce where you can get like acres with ocean views for like, I don't know, like a couple $100,000 for like an estate essentially.
Yeah, and it's a 90-minute drive from San Juan. The whole island, you know, is 100 miles wide by 30 miles deep. You could drive around the whole thing in 5 hours. You can drive from San Juan, you know, to the to Mayaguez and, you know, call it 2 hours, 2.5 hours. To the south in 90 minutes. To the east in 45 minutes to an hour. The whole island is very accessible. It's like that perfect size. It's like from Orange County to San Diego, and just in the area that's, you know, within 30 miles of the beach.
So I know you've talked about a couple of other really big projects in planning. Anything you can sort of give updates on?
Well, I got tons of things going on. Obviously, on the EOS front, I'm actively involved in building out the foundation, which is called the EOS Alliance, which is the nonprofit vehicle that is just helping facilitate the conversations amongst the major constituents so that, you know, people know what's happening and what their options are and what choices, you know, they can make. We don't have any authority. We don't make any decisions. All we do is facilitate conversations among stakeholders and produce that information for the, you know, the community at large, so that they can make the most informed decisions. You know, because Block 1's hands are tied. They're limited in what they can say. You know, the block producers are all biased, and so it was clear you needed another sort of entity in there to help facilitate the community's conversations. So that's a, you know, more nonprofit activity. Obviously, I'm doing all sorts of stuff in Puerto Rico on the venture side, as well as on the special opportunity zone side. Mount Gox is interesting. Some people know, but most people have forgotten that I bought Mount Gox the day it failed. Originally, I was buying it for $1. I changed it to 1 Bitcoin, which at the time was a 450x increase in the price. But I had bought out Mark Karpelis and Jed McCaleb's position. The bankruptcy courts then threw that into liquidation, and I used to wear a shirt and I would say, you know, rehabilitate, don't liquidate, rehabilitate. Having fun with all of this stuff. And Mount Gox is now coming back into, it's going to be rehabilitated. And so that's obviously now back on my plate as the person that contractually owns it. That's starting to take up some time. Taking a couple of companies right now that I've started in the past and bringing them down into Puerto Rico to focus on, you know, payments and banking. You probably own parts of some of these companies. I'll leave the names out for the moment. I think you're on at least one or maybe both of those cap tables. I'm very interested in, the biggest thing I've seen right now is with, again, I'm chain agnostic. I'm a huge advocate for Bitcoin, Ethereum, Cardano, XRP, all the things. I believe if anyone succeeds in making the world a better place, we all win. I believe that maximalism is the same as fanaticism. You know, it's saying my chain is better than your chain. It's the same thing we've learned about religions for thousands of years. I'm very much chain agnostic, so when I speak positively about one thing, it doesn't mean I'm not, you know, I'm not that biased. I have my opinions, though. And so EOS is something that people should be paying very, very, very close attention to right now. I don't know if you're following the data, but it's now about 4 or 5 times the size of Ethereum in terms of transactional volume, with the ability to scale another 100 or 1,000 times right now. I'm actually starting to play with applications that have been built on EOS. Like, it works. Like, we have the first actual blockchain, the first blockchain that's live that can actually do scale and can do consumer applications. This is truly, to me, the 1995 moment. EOS will not be the only one. You're going to have a few others that'll be live over the next 12 months. But we've always been like, where are we in the tech cycle? The last 10 years have been, the 1970s, 80s, up and until 95. It was the building of all the infrastructure so that we could do the things that became the World Wide Web or web. But we now can start to do consumer applications. It's there. It's very, very, very real. It's functioning. You can build Facebook on this thing, and it runs. I mean, I'm playing with, it's there. If you're a developer, you should at least go kick the tires and understand what's going on there. And clearly, it's not going to be the only platform able to do it, but it is. It's live, and it works. And so we can now actually build all the things we've been talking about for the first time.
Great. So because we ran a little late from lunch, I'm going to keep the questions to about 5 minutes. Questions for Brock? Anyone?
Brock, sorry, I'm going to ask you a question. I just saw you at my event in Salt Lake. When we first came to town and we met in that little place, you took us on a tour of Old San Juan and showed us the area. It was like absolutely beautiful. For the people who want to go to Restart Week, and don't know where to go, should they talk to Adam? Who do we need to talk to so that these people can go there?
Yeah, so there's the website, there's Twitter, there should be Instagram, there's social media, there's Telegram groups, which you can invite them in. We have groups, but yeah, Adam, any of us, I'm typically the worst person. I do my best to respond to everyone, but my phone gets so many messages. I apologize if I miss yours. But yeah, I try to be pretty accessible. You can reach me on Twitter, Instagram, wherever. I try to respond. It's just, there's so many messages, I can't see everything. And so I miss things often. But yeah, please, and restartweek.org. And if you want to do an event, come down. The next one will be in Fajardo, which is the east coast of the island, which is really close to San Juan. So you fly into San Juan nice and easy. And it's where the islands are. It's where the big marinas are. It's where the boating is. It's where, if you wanted to go to the Virgin Islands, where you'd likely cruise from. But we've timed it December 10th to the 14th because Art Basel is December 6th to the 9th. And so for anyone that's into the arts and creative things, it's going to be a strong emphasis on art. I'm getting a lot of really interesting art and media people to come down from Art Basel. I'm basically trying to get everyone from around the world that comes into Miami to try and be like, hey, you're almost there, come on in. And so I'm going to be funneling a lot of Art Basel people in. So for anyone that audience is relevant, meaning you'll have big money, art-centric, culture-centric people.
Yeah, everyone.
I'll be
Brock.
back too. One more question.
Brock, hey, Brock. Question in Puerto Rico, there seems to be a lot of focus on solar, at least from an energy standpoint. There's a couple of folks that are working on a biomass energy development. They actually have the machine. They want to tokenize this, and they want to put it in Puerto Rico to start because of the biomass that's there. How do they bring that into Puerto Rico?
Well, I mean, the first thing is showing up, right?
Yeah.
You got to come down there and do the work, which is connecting with the right locals that are the ones that can help you get it done. You're not going to get things done down there without having local partners. So, the first thing is show up, find the right local partners, because that's a process. Figure out who you've got chemistry with, who you want to do these things with, and I can obviously be helpful. Our whole community is always, facilitating events and connecting people. And at this point, most of my tribe now are Puerto Ricans.
Right.
Obviously it wasn't that way on day one, but we're very much involved with local community and continue to do more so We work very closely with the universities. We're working very closely with lots of government agencies, working with, kind of everybody we can. We have open doors and open minds and open hearts.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful thing. And, energy is a big issue in Puerto Rico.
But if you're talking about biomass, like if you want to talk about trash and be able to take plastics and convert it to fuel, stuff like that.
No. It's actually taking plants and actually turning it into biodiesel.
Oh, yeah. I don't know that specifically, what's possible in that regard. The main thing you have is there's the main energy company down there is a quasi-government energy company known as PREPA.
Right.
PREPA is basically all of the power there. PREPA is in the middle of being restructured and likely privatized, meaning they're going through layoffs. They've had massive layoffs. So getting anything done with PREPA right now is nearly impossible. So if you want to do anything down there in energy, you have to basically be able to do things that don't require connecting to the energy grid.
Yeah, and
You need, which means solar doesn't work, wind doesn't work, that may not work unless you do them all together. You have to create a resilient enough energy solution that you can provide power to whoever it is that you're servicing without ever having to connect to the grid. You need to build smart grids, microgrids, blockchain. I'm very focused on energy. I'm not an expert, obviously, but I'm having these conversations every day.
And I will reach out to you on this because this group owns the patent for the actual technology that does work. It does take plant life and turn
Please,
it into biomass.
I would love to try and help
But they
connect
do-
them with the
they-
right local
they
partners.
And they want to put this on a chain. They just don't know where to start down there in Puerto Rico.
It starts by come on down. I'm going to be in Puerto Rico pretty much full time until the end of February.
Okay, I'm gonna bring them down.
I'm gone for, I'm here for, I arrived, an hour ago. I fly out tonight back to Puerto Rico. When I'm out of Puerto Rico, it's for like 1 or 2 days, just very specific. I spend most of my time there because there's a ton of work to do.
And this technology actually really works. And I think it's exciting, and I think Puerto Rico's the place to put it first because they need this. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you, Brock Pierce. Okay.